Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to mention real briefly, our chair and vice chair are not here today because of medical. So I didn't see anything in the bylaws that states what you do when that happens. However, I know we talked about this at one of our TAC meetings, and they said something to the effect that you guys would take a vote on who would want to chair the meeting today. So does anybody want to do that? Any volunteers to chair the meeting today?
You don't want me.
Do you have a problem with one of the staff going around it? Or do you want one of you guys?
I think you should do it now.
Okay, so first of all, welcome to the meeting. And as you know from the last meeting that we had, John Hotchkiss announced he wasn't going to be here because he was having surgery. So it's okay to say that because he mentioned it. And anyway, I got a card form if you'd like to sign it. You can just pass it around. You don't get control to. So I thought first, before we get started, we'd go ask for introductions around the room because I know we have a couple of people that haven't been here before. I'm Marilyn with Strafford Regional Planning Commission, and I'll start to my right.
I'm Sarah with Strafford Regional Planning Commission.
I'm Tom, Strafford Regional Planning Commission.
I'm Chris Shiner, Strafford Regional Planning.
Ed Comeau, representing Wakefield.
Paul Lockwood, New Hampshire DES.
Lee Levine, Federal Highway Administration.
Brian Taps, about Somerville.
Gretchen Young, Dover, and I'm just filling in for Chris Murphy. Karen Pollard, Rochester.
Martin LaFerty, representing the town of Farmington.
Larry Brown, Milton.
And Colin Lentz from Strafford Regional Planning.
Natasha Lochenko, Strafford Regional Planning Commission.
All right, so briefly for staff introductions, I just have some big news to tell everyone. I know for the last 7 years I've seen me here doing all the minutes and bothering you to see if you can attend the meeting or not. I'm still going to be with Strafford Regional Planning Commission, but I won't be your recording secretary any longer. Starting this month and going forward, my colleague here, Sarah McGraw, will start taking the minutes and preparing you through the process to get you ready to go into the meeting. Sarah, you're in good hands with Sarah. She's done the minutes for the Exeter Planning Board and Conservation Commission and Planning Board, so she's well versed in taking minutes. So please make her feel as welcome. You did me all these years, and I love working with all of you and I learned a lot from you, so thank you. So I guess, yes. I'm still going to be around. You're still going to hear me talking on the phone. I'm just going to go do more of my admin work, which is what I was hired for many years ago. I'm busy doing a lot of HR things and stuff. So.
As part of a living memory, I just wanted to wish you well that you were getting out.
Nope, I'm still here 7 years later. I'm still sitting around. And
Retract that.
Yeah, that's right. We're going on. You're still stuck with me, unfortunately. So anyway, I guess I'm looking to see if anyone would like to make a motion to approve the draft minutes from October 3rd, 2014, or if anybody has any comments or corrections.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to approve the minutes as written.
Anyone like to second that?
Second.
Okay, well, thank you. And next up is the Transportation Alternatives Program projects. We're going to hear from Colin, who's going to speak about that, and then it will be up for approval for a recommendation to send to the policy committee for their approval.
So last Thursday, John Hotchkiss, Wally Dunham, Chris Shiner, myself, Sarah, we all met to discuss, kind of analyze and score the two projects that were proposed for one for Dover, one for Somersworth, for the Transportation Alternatives Program. And I put a little bit in the memo that is in your packet. This is money that comes from the Federal Authorization Bill, MAP 21, that is distributed by DOT, and they will have the final say in which projects. I forget, do you remember the total number, the number of projects that were proposed? top of your head, I can't remember. It was
Submitted application.
it was a substantial number.
Well, if I can interject, I think it was something like 75 projects in
Yes.
40 odd towns.
Yeah, so a fair number of projects. And our RPC scores will go into that final decision process, just to give you an idea of the higher up process. And this is just the criteria weighting that we used, and so safety and potential for success are kind of a big portion of that. And I just wanted to give you a rundown of our two different projects. First of all, Somersworth was, its main focus was on revitalizing some sidewalks in the downtown area. This is connected to an overall downtown revitalization process, major effort that is drawing kind of reinvestment in some vacant storefronts and residential areas. The sidewalks were in pretty bad shape for people who don't know Somersworth, or that they are in bad shape. So they're looking to replace some along, not too well, but Washington Street along here, part of Main Street, a little pedestrian bump out here across from GE. And so there's a residential facility here for elderly and disabled residents. And that was, one of their major concerns in the application was access for these folks, for Somersworth residents who it was almost impossible for them to use sidewalks because they were crumbling. They had potholes in the sidewalks. Let's see. And as I said, this is going to be connected to other projects that are ongoing right now. The major construction along High Street here, through the center of town, all the way over to the state line here.
Colin,
Yes.
will this connect to any transit stops or improve any transit access?
That wasn't a major focus of the project. Improving this street will improve access to coast stops along that. So that wasn't a major focus. Like it's not setting up a rail station or anything like that or connecting, but it does connect to coast.
It makes access easier.
It makes access easier, especially for wheelchair access, for example, I would imagine. And that was, unless I'm forgetting anything major, any questions on the Somersworth project? This is pretty much their focus. Sidewalks. So again, TAP, Transportation Alternatives Program, is all about non-motorized transportation. So bicycle, pedestrian, public transit, trains, and so it's all about connectivity and access and safety. So among the many things that we use to score this in our template are the traffic situation. Chris dredged up our data on crashes along High Street, Washington Street, and any of the surrounding relevant streets there. We used our traffic data, sorry?
You mind if I add to that?
Yeah.
So we looked at not just the applications, but DOT's reported crash data and whatever traffic volume data that we had collected over the last 10 years. We tried to keep that as current as possible. Well, in some cases, it was just an internal informative tool to say, this road that the pedestrians on this hypothetical sidewalk are going to be crossing is high volume, low volume, maybe we should think about safety concerns, etc. So we tried to be as holistic as we could to get as much information, that we could compare these projects to their ranking criteria as much as possible.
Did you do any modeling at all?
Nothing sophisticated, no.
All right, the last thing I'll say on the Somersworth project is the major level of local support from Chamber of Commerce, other business leaders, the Filion Terrace, the residential facility there, other economic interest groups there, General Electric in particular, The employees there were excited about greater access and kind of a rebuilding downtown for lunch breaks. Just a nice place to spend a little break. So a major letter of support, as well as the official boards, the mayor's office, etc. Dover was a little different project. If anyone's familiar with the Dover Community Trail that goes along Pacheco in the northern stretch of the city, and the rail trail. The main existing trailhead is right here. So this is the Dover Transportation with the Downeaster stop, and the center of town off to the right of the picture there. And so there's a trailhead here that goes along a rail trail, and I have an expanded map that I'll show you as well. So the project really kind of has two portions. It's probably better if I just go to this one. So this is zoomed out in the first photo we were looking at. The train station, the trail goes down along the river and goes for a considerable distance the river that way. And the existing improved rail trail is this broad yellow line here in the middle. Some issues. Can everyone see this? I didn't think it was going to be this dark. Good? So the broad yellow line here is the existing rail trail that's been improved. People use it for biking, walking, skiing in the winter. They don't plow it, and I think it's too short for snowmobilers to really use that for any valuable length of time. We've got the middle school here, and then so the project focuses on this portion right here and then here. So they're hoping to expand the improved portion of the rail trail from this street here so that it connects to this little commercial node. This is if you ever come out, there's a 108, 16 going over, and then the Burger King is right facing you if you come out of the center of town. And people already use this currently. They're just hoping to improve it for safety, clearing brush, kind of minimal work required on this part here. The Rotary Club has offered to donate funding and labor for a trailhead right here. 4th Street goes across the bridge, and the trail just kind of dives off the street currently down an unimproved path into the woods and up along the river. And so there would be a trailhead there and steps down. So it's a little more pedestrian friendly, or people who are less imprinted. Question?
Oh, yes, sir.
The funding for that piece that they're going to add, how much is that project?
This one here?
Yeah.
If you give me a minute, I can look it up. So the minimum project, the minimum fund cost level for any project in TAP is $200,000. Cap is $700,000. I can give you an exact number. I just have to look it up on the server real quick.
Just to follow up.
Yes.
I thought TAP funding couldn't be used for trails. I thought it had to be used for transportation connectivity. So
it does set aside specific money for rail trails, for refurbishing old rail beds. And there's actually a specific number I can look up for that as well. They allocated a certain portion for rail trails and then sort of different distributions. So,
thank you.
The TAP funds can be used for recreational trail purposes. Formerly, the TE money was there had to be transportation purpose for those funds, but TAP has a little bit of expanded eligibility in that.
yeah, so I think the focus for the Dover project was safety and pedestrian access. So people are, in particular students, that's why I highlighted the school. Students already use the trail. It's mostly recreational. I don't think people are commuting, so to speak, from the center of town down to the commercial node. Let's see, but this has been on Dover's list for a long time the things they want to do. And again, part of continuous efforts to improve downtown district access.
That is a rural area? You said there were woods?
It's wooded, yes. So
Okay.
it's kind of this little green wooded area in the middle of developed areas. Most of the residential is here. It's heavier on this side than this side. This is sort of highway and businesses and school, and a little bit here. This is Route 9 here. You can't see it with the resolution, but this is that big construction project going on. It's slowing everything down.
Is there lighting on that? So,
Not specified in the application, and there isn't right now.
no, you mentioned safety. That's why I
Well,
brought up the question about lighting.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said safety, but sort of improvement. So people are using it already. They just want to make sure that more people can feel comfortable using it, because I think it's kind of brushy back there. I haven't walked the unimproved portion, but it goes through a swamp.
Is lighting eligible for that funding?
I don't know for sure. That's a good question. I think anything related to the project is eligible.
Okay.
I don't think lighting is ineligible. They didn't mention lighting. Any questions on Dover? Or paints a clear enough picture? Do you want to talk about I can show you the different funding levels at the end, or unless other people are interested,
I just wanted an approximate, just so I can get that.
I'd be curious too. It's not too much trouble.
Okay, I mean, I know where it is right away. 1 second, please. So project total 400,000.
Well, I'm sorry.
400,000 for Dover. So
For the entire city, or just that one section of trail?
just the project. So the project including improvements to the trail here and signage, I think, for the street up here, because this is just these are residential streets and the trail is here.
Thank you.
Total project funding.
Yeah, if I could. How much of that is Dover have to kick in? Is it all funded completely by,
No, I believe, let me go back to make sure, I believe it's 20% match, 20% local match is required.
okay.
Yeah, 80 federal, 20 for the town, or the city. And just to recap, I think there's something like 5 million 15 in potential funding to distribute from DOT, and something like 35 to 40 million in projects proposed. So, or actually, I put the real numbers in the note. Yeah, 7.5 million in proposals and 75 million to distribute to projects and 35 million proposed. Probably shouldn't quote me on those numbers, but.
The point I think Colin is trying to make is that it's very competitive, and there was, we had lots and lots of money, or DOT had lots of money to distribute. You could fund a lot of them, but only a fraction of the projects will get funded.
If no one else has any questions, I think.
Any other comments or questions? All right, so I'm looking for a motion for the Transportation Alternatives Program projects for a motion to recommend to the Policy Committee for their approval at their November 21st meeting. So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, next up is the 2015.
You have to take a vote.
Oh, yes, that's right, I'm sorry. So are all in favor, or are there any looking for?
All in favor, aye. All opposed, and the motion is carried.
Okay, is anybody, all right, so all in favor, please?
Aye.
Okay, anybody opposed?
Opposed?
Any abstentions?
Marilyn, on the minutes approval, to change the subject, get back to the minutes, we didn't take a vote there either.
Okay,
But
so
we
we'll go
could
back to that, thank you.
abstain on that vote. That was
Okay, you're one abstention. Okay. So going back to the minutes of October 3rd, 2014, we had a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Same.
Any vote opposition? Opposed? All right, thank you. All right, continuing on in the 4.1 on the agenda, the 2015-24 Transportation Improvement Program. And Tom?
Yep. So that's a pretty quick one. The TAP is winding down now, so the TIP is the next piece that Chris and I will be tackling, and going over the projects for our region and sending it back to DOT to go into the statewide transportation program. So more updates on that in the future.
Great. Next up is the performance measures updates. We're going to hear from Natasha.
So, two updates here and then one little presentation. So the first update is 5 of our staff members from SRPC attended the New Hampshire Integrated Transportation Planning Workshop this Tuesday. Lee was there, he was by the workshop. It was a really good experience for a lot of us to meet other planners and other transportation representatives from other MPOs, from the NHDOT, we met some people from Vermont, from Oregon, who are working on some really interesting upcoming things related to performance measures, to scenario-based planning. But we really, we learned some interesting techniques, learned about some new tools that are available regarding performance measures and scenario-based planning. So, yeah, so just, that was a good experience, and it will definitely help us moving forward. We also earlier this week met with Southern Maine MPO and with Rockingham MPO. Transport New Hampshire was also in our meeting, and we discussed our collaboration regarding performance measures moving forward. And we decided that we need to begin collaborating, or I guess enhance the collaboration with Southern MPO and Nashua MPO. So that's just a little update. So we haven't scheduled that meeting yet, but we will be enhancing our collaboration with performance measures.
Definitely. So we had invited New Hampshire DOT, and they weren't available to attend the meeting, but we'll continue to invite them. And then we also reviewed a draft memorandum of understanding or agreement on how the 3 MPOs in the Piscataqua region, Southern Maine, Rockingham, and Strafford will proceed forward in collaboration with various projects and stuff.
Any questions about those two? Great. And then we have just a little presentation for you to once again share some more information on performance measures. Once again, real quick, why we're doing it and some progress that we've been making. So we'll just real brief mention of the legislative background that requires us to have these measures. A couple of benefits for having performance measures in transportation decision-making, the real generic process that the Strafford MPO is taking on the measures, some work in progress and some updates from the last meeting, and some of the next steps that both short-term and a little bit longer-term steps that we have in mind for performance measures. And then last but not least, a few key resources that we found really helpful just in case people are interested, and they're kind of generic guiding resources. And so a series of legislature has really led up to MAP 21, which really outlines 7 national performance goals and 8 federal planning factors that state what types of topics and disciplines our measures should cover. So as we're going through, narrowing down our measures and just through the project in general, that's a big piece of legislation that we're keeping in mind. And if people want to know about the specifics about what the 7 national goals are, or the 8 federal planning factors are, we can certainly go over that. Just for the sake of time, I'm just going to skip that for now. But we are paying attention to that for sure. So performance measures, they have a number of benefits associated with them. Not only do they help us clarify our definitions and our goals for our MPO and our region, they also help us track and monitor our performance and let us know how we're doing over time. We can use these measures to set targets that will help us meet our specific objectives and also our goals, and really help us achieve our vision. They help us with the use of efficient resources. They will help with finding and helping evaluate alternatives, looking for which project may have better investment, and they also provide transparency. And they also, with the numbers, they help improve our communication, and they help provide some education and information to our stakeholders as well. And so with this series of these benefits, really the overarching benefit of having performance measures is to spur action, to achieve the quality of life for our region, and really to achieve our vision for the future. That's really kind of the overarching, broad, generic goal that we have. And so the process, once again, real kind of broad overview, kind of skipped a lot of sub-steps and details, but the general process that the Strafford MPO has been taking really comes from federal highways, and it starts with identifying our measures and our candidate measures. And I think we mentioned maybe during the last meeting that we had 170 measures that we're looking at. And a series of variables go into that identification process, and this measure identification process is really sort of like a circular, it has this kind of back and forth relationship with selecting the measures. And so as we're looking at our data, our resources, our goals, as we're looking at what our stakeholders think is important, we're narrowing down the measures, selecting some, adding some measures, removing some measures. And so the idea is to bring you a narrowed down list at some point, hopefully in the near future, of these measures as well. And so as we select our measures, we then need to set some targets for our goals, for what we want our numbers to be for particular years. And as we look at our trends, how are these measures, the numbers, how are they matching up to our targets? We can start to put together some really specific strategies on how to reach our target that will help us achieve our objectives and then our vision. And so with all of this, we can incorporate these into our transportation planning, the Metro Plan, the TAP program, and other transportation policies or programs and projects. That's the idea. And so you may remember during our last meeting, we mentioned we started off with a number of objectives, a specific number of 163 objectives, and through qualitative analysis, where we basically went through each objective and coded each objective for common themes and overlapping themes, and narrowed down the objectives to 77. The objectives help us identify our measured priorities. And something to just mention about our objectives is that although right now they do talk about specific programs, and they are somewhat, some of them are kind of specific, but a lot of these will become more specific over time as we learn more about the process and as we start to see what numbers our measures basically show. And so some objectives will be more specific with real specific numbers and targets, whereas others will cover broader societal goals. enhancing economic vitality, for example, over time, kind of a broader objective. And so there's definitely a range in the mix of what it is we're trying to achieve. And so the purpose of this slide is not to have you read all of the text that's on there, but it's to show you the quantity and the diversity of topics that our measures cover. And so we're looking at everything from access to road infrastructure to the environment, affordability. So we're really trying to cover a broad range of themes, but all of them really go back and relate to transportation. And so as we're narrowing down our objectives, and we mentioned this also previously, we're really, the goal is to really make sure that the objectives are realistic, that they're feasible, that our stakeholders, our committees agree on them, that they're smart objectives. And one of the, items that goes into making sure that you get a smart objective is looking at how feasible the objective actually is. And so as a staff, we had transportation and non-transportation staff at SRBC who sat down a couple of weeks ago, and we went through every single one of 177 objectives and determined, kind of roughly speaking, but from staff knowledge of our resources, of connections, networks, we determined the feasibility of each objective. And so about 60% of those 177 were within the high feasibility range, and about a quarter of all the, or these are measures, I'm sorry, 60% of the measures were within the high feasibility range, and about a quarter of them were low feasibility. And now, just because something is low feasibility, once again, does not mean that it's not a priority. So that is just one of the ways to make sure that you have a smart objective. It's just one of the things that goes into it. And just to provide you with an example, is it hard to read? The little chart at the bottom, it's a little difficult to read.
For me it is, Jackie.
Yeah, I mean, even from here it's not. Yeah, even from here it's not that easy. So just to provide an example of how we went about that, we have, let's say we have one objective or one measure here that's related to affordability. And the measure looks at percentage of household income spent on housing and transportation. And this is one of those equity measures that really looks at the trade-off that people make between housing and between transportation. How close, do you need to live to your job, and how much money are you spending on transportation? What kind of trade-offs are people making? And so we looked at whether the data was available and how quickly and how difficult it would be to calculate this measure. And through those two factors, we evaluated whether the feasibility was high, medium, or low. And just a little point to make here, a little note on here is that it was really valuable for us to have Chris, our GIS analyst, at this meeting, because a lot of these measures really require the use of GIS, geographic information systems. And so it was really just crucial to have his knowledge of the current data layers, current resources that we have regarding GIS. And so because for this specific measure we had the available data and we decided that it would not take that much time to calculate this measure, we decided to rank it as a high feasibility measure. The measure above, which is related to access and looks at the number of miles for average proximity of major regional employers to major transportation corridors. For this particular measure, we don't have the data. And if we did have the data, it would not take much time to calculate this measure, but because the data is currently not available and a little bit more difficult to obtain, it's not readily in our server or anything, the feasibility is medium for that one. And this measure also started to get us thinking about establishing our criteria for the measures even further. For example, defining of what a major regional employer actually is and setting criteria on that. Do employers that are real close, to the region but just right outside of it, do they have? Just as an example.
So that's an example of something that could be more feasible.
Right. Exactly. And so the idea is to really find this perfect match between our measures and our objectives. And a lot of the measures that we currently have, they will support multiple objectives. And so there's definitely some efficiency work that can be done there. But as we go through, narrow down our measures, we try to see how they, once again, help us achieve our overall vision, our goals, and our objectives through this matching process. And so some of the next steps, once again, this narrowing down process is taking a little bit of time, but we definitely want to make sure that we don't miss anything, that we have a pretty thorough system for evaluating our measures. And so once we narrow it down to somewhat of a reasonable number for review, we are hoping to bring that list in the near future to our committees, involve other stakeholders, and also particularly other MPOs. As we mentioned, Nashua and Southern MPOs will be involved in this as well. The DOT, Glenn Davison, Cynthia mentioned, was not able to attend our meeting on Wednesday, but he's really hoping to make our meeting. So we're really hoping that we can work real closely with them. We really, once we also narrow down our measures and decide on a more reasonable number, we need to collect some sort of a protocol for how we will collect the data, what kind of assumptions we'll make in our data and in our calculations. And we also need to create some sort of a process for looking at the assurance and the quality of the data, which eventually will help us achieve our, basically setting our desired targets, which is also a pretty lengthy process, but a really important one. And with these targets, we can look at our trends and see how we're doing, whether we're really reaching our goals or not. And we can demonstrate that through our systems performance report, which will then help guide us into implementing this performance-based decision-making into transportation planning, broadly speaking. So hopefully that was not too much of a mouthful. I tried to provide some detail, but also some generic information, so hopefully provides a good overview. There's some great resources out there. We don't need to necessarily populate the page with all of them, but some really key ones that we've been using come from federal highways and from other organizations as well. But yeah, and then a lot of states and other MPOs out there across the country have done some great work on these measures. So,
could you mention the report 708 from the second one down, please?
The 708?
Yeah.
Sure, yes. The report 708 from the Transportation Research Board that has over 300 measure examples, and so we've been looking at that as a guide to make sure that we are incorporating all of the possible measures, you know, related to transportation that are really out there. Is there anything more particular? No. Okay.
Is this list available somewhere in the PDF?
I can print these out for you for sure. And actually, one report that we also found really helpful, and we used that during our workshop on Tuesday, is this Federal Highways Performance-Based Planning and Programming Guidebook from 2013. So this is a really useful document for sure. All of these were really very useful. And there are so many other examples out there. It's just, there's a lot of literature on this. A lot of MPOs have different approaches. They have different resources. They have different regional contexts. And so it's not going to be the same approach for every single region or state. So we're just trying to find out what fits us, basically what fits our region.
You had mentioned early on that legislation was requiring us to do this measurement piece. Are there specific measures that we are required to deliver on behalf of that legislation? Or did they specify some things that have to be there?
Yeah, so yeah, I can answer part of the question, and Lee, I'm not sure if you want to expand. So there are a series of topics, for example, the 7 national goals. We have to make sure that we are covering safety, infrastructure condition, congestion reduction, but those are kind of, you know, those don't have specific, I guess, measures associated with them just yet. The safety goal does have a series of measures, but from what I understand, the other goals should be coming out with measures in a few months. That's what I heard at the workshop. So is that?
Yeah, there's a rulemaking that's in process right now. There's a notice of proposed rulemaking a while ago. People submitted comments, and Cynthia was one of them.
Okay. So, but we do have a series of topics that, yes, we are required to cover, and we're definitely covering them and addressing them. And as far as specific measures, there are several measures related to safety that are currently out there, and we are incorporating those. And so a little bit of this is also a waiting process to see see what other measures related to system reliability, or there's environmental sustainability as well, congestion reduction, what specific measures we will be required to do associated with that. But
And just a quick follow-up, so
Sure.
then when you're scoring the different things that you're going to be measuring, are the ones that are required still going through that process? So you're determining, do you have the data? Is it readily available? How long does it take to calculate all of those things as well?
yes, they
So
do go through that
you're not
process,
just
yes.
skipping that.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yep, they go through that process for sure. But that's also where our kind of priorities and objectives come in. Some of these measures, whether they have, let's just, if we take some random measure from one of the required goals, it may be low feasibility for us for whatever reason, who knows what it is. New ones that may come out. But because it's a high priority, it's still up on the list, so.
Thank you.
As you winnow down your 170 measures to whatever you come up with, working with the other RPCs, do you tend to find that you all generally come into agreement with the measures? My point being that we don't want to see a statewide analysis eventually. If you have different measures, obviously that's not going to work.
Yeah, so the idea, right now, we don't know. I think all the different RPCs are at different stages of this process. So we don't necessarily, let's see, how do I say this? Do you want to, yeah.
So that it's the MPOs. So MAP 21 tasks this to the state DOTs and to the MPOs. And my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, but the state DOTs have the lead, but the MPOs are also tasked. So it's an ongoing process with the state DOTs taking the lead. However, there are things on the list that we have no responsibilities for on a day-to-day basis. We don't plow roads and salt and do things like that and do repairs and guardrails and stuff. So from our perspective, it's really important that we've developed the measures for the MPO functions that the DOT may not, so the planning level functions that we're most concerned with, we want to make sure that they're incorporated and in the right context for us to use effectively in our work. And so it's a melding of state having the lead, MPOs also tasked to be mandatorily doing this, and then merging our two roles and functions so that we create one system. Have I said that correctly?
Yeah, that's good. And in terms of MAP 21 and the national legislation, the list of measures is fairly narrow. It's system performance measures. So the things that are specifically in the legislation are things like related to safety, injuries, fatalities, bridge conditions on the national highway system, pavement conditions, and then congestion. And a lot of these measures are focused on the national highway system. So those measures will be coming down from, as Cynthia said, from the New Hampshire DOT. They'll set some statewide measures and targets, and then they'll work cooperatively with the MPOs. The MPOs will develop their measures that support, complement the statewide measures in those specific areas. But beyond that, yeah, you can do a lot of performance measures in a lot of different areas. And Strafford here is going well above and beyond with a list of measures that they're considering right now. You can look at things like livability, livability-related measures, environment-related measures. So there's lots of them out there. But in terms of what the federal legislation is focused on right now, it's really safety, bridge condition, paving condition, and congestion. Those are the big ones that are specifically addressed by the legislation.
Thank you. So we will have a lot of overlap, but we'll also have some of our regional contextual measures. And one of the things that we're hoping to accomplish at this upcoming meeting with the other MPOs is, decide on which measures we can work together on cooperatively and work on obtaining the data for. Basically, not have all 4 MPOs trying to reinvent the wheel. So share the workload and just make it more efficient, but still apply extra measures that are more relevant to a particular region. Any other questions?
Yeah, so essentially when we score a project, there should be a way have measures for it. So it comes into the process as a planning, you know, and we're looking at feasibility, and it goes through the process, gets funded, it's implemented, and now how effective is it, and is it really accomplishing what it was hoped to accomplish or envisioned to accomplish? So, yeah. And we have, you know, walkability is really important for quality of life, and you keep hearing that quality of life is the major theme that we're working forward in this region on, and all the sub-themes that go along with that.
Does anyone have any more comments or questions?
And I would like to say that I really appreciate this approach because it really gives us the chance to integrate all of our plans and have an aligned vision for the entire region, but also keep the details that make it Strafford and not Rockingham or Southern Maine or Lakes. We're all distinct here in New Hampshire.
As always.
Okay, thank you. Now we're at project updates, so we'll start with you, Chris.
Okay. So segueing from Natasha's presentation on performance measures, in order to support that effort, we are contemplating a major data reorganization here at Strafford. In terms of efficiency and effectiveness to move forward on the performance measures. We are at a point where after turnover over the last 10 or 15 years, our GIS data needs an overhaul. Transportation in particular is a problem. Every new GIS analyst had a slightly different system. They stacked on top of each other, and now staff have to spend a notable amount of time looking for the data that they need to do anything GIS related. And in most cases that tends to be me, but as I'm not the only one who does GIS work, it's not just me. Certainly I have a strong interest in doing this, but it's across the board. So in order to do that, in order to determine, frankly, in some cases, what data we have when we're looking for things, do we have this, do we not, what's the feasibility of a particular performance measure, we are in the process of trying to come up with a new holistic organization system so that we can find things. And it's going to be a long process. It's not something that we're going to tackle all at once. But Matt Sullivan, one of our planners, and I have been working together, consulting with Cynthia, to come up with a system that is intuitive, that is straightforward, and that we can roll out in pieces. It will require the coordination with the rest of the staff, but the hope is that we will have something that is long-lasting and that we won't have to do this ever again for a very long time. Yes, I'm very excited about that possibility. So as I say, it breaks down into probably 4 or so different increments. But overall, and again, we're not going to try and do this all at once, but overall, we're talking something like 1,500 hours of work to do this. It's a huge project. The first section is only maybe about 300 to 400 hours worth of work. Some of this is going to be iterative, and that I hope that the learning process, as we figure out from going from theory to practice, what works and what doesn't work, that the follow-up sections will take much less time. But based on my knowledge, I have done a reorganization project on a smaller scale before, and so I'm extrapolating from that, and best of our knowledge, that's what it's going to take. Sure.
So you may notice a tiny little detail about Chris's title. So his title is GIS and Technical Analyst, and prior to that, our staff were GIS and Transportation Analysts, and I spent a lot of time reworking our job description and doing the recruitment for this, because this is an ongoing need that I was very much aware of and have been trying to struggle with. And with the change in personnel, this gave us an opportunity to go out there and and redesign our job description and recruit for someone who has this skill set. We're not the only ones looking for this type of skill set, because with the ability for organizations, whether they're business, nonprofit, or public, the ability to create data and manipulate it and analyze it is just, you know, just burgeoned in the last 5, 6, 7 years. You know, we can get software that we never could get before, and so we have a lot of different people collecting and using it, and it's connected to the spatial analytics, and so we're not the only ones facing this. We're trying to get on top of this so that we can effectively keep moving forward and have an internal structure that handles the increasing amount of data collection that we're doing. So this is a very positive thing, and I'm really happy that Chris is sitting down and analyzing this with Matt and going forward and having a plan and presenting it so that we can get this accomplished. And then, you know, the next thing that happens in the digital world that makes even more stuff available and easy to happen, we'll be able to move with it rather than facing a horrendous, massive brick wall that we can't get over or around.
Is one of the challenges coordinating data from the municipalities? Because I know that we also have a GIS system. I don't know how different it is. It's not my area of expertise. I just basically ask for things and then someone has to find it. So, but I mean, I know that we've been having a lot of conversations about our own GIS data and upgrading the systems that we have so we can layer more data onto the different fields that we have. How do municipalities and your data work together? Or do they not?
Well, getting data from municipalities is a component, because certainly data that we get from our towns and cities is I mean, one of our data sources. You know, we also have the statewide data collections and so on. The problem that they're not. I'm going to put this. Municipal data is not a problem in and of itself. It's merely a component of the data that we store, and we need to have an overarching organization that works for everything we have, regardless of where it came from. So,
but are all of us generally using the same systems that you are, or are they all completely different?
I'm not entirely sure what you mean by systems.
Well, you said you had in your data a lot of that every analyst had their own way. Yes. or tools.
Well, not tools, but
like naming conventions.
Yeah. Naming conventions, and if I'll use a library analogy, one might use the Dewey Decimal System, and one might use a completely different way of filing things.
Okay.
So it's the filing structure that that is competing.
That's helpful. Thank you. I was confused about what you were.
What about the other commissions? What are they doing? Are they in the same condition?
Not necessarily. So I've talked with a couple other folks who are my counterparts. They have systems in place. As I say, I've talked with them. I've tried to learn from them. I talked with one on Tuesday who's going to give me an outline of the system that they have. But it's sort of an organic thing, and because each of the regions seems to be different, one size does not fit all. So because the different commissions tend to seem to focus in slightly different areas, it's a question of how can we adapt one system to another, and it's dependent on the size of the staff using them. That seems to vary significantly. In a lot of, to the best of my knowledge, in several of the other commissions, it's one person, and so you can have one person responsible for it, and you don't have conflict. In our case, we have enough people using the GIS stuff and doing analysis that it's gotten jumbled over the years. And part of that is lacking a comprehensive protocol of this kind of data goes here, that kind of data goes there. Efforts have been started in the past, as far as I understand it, but we need to follow through and take this effort to a point where it actually becomes implemented.
It seems to make sense to coordinate with all the other commissions, so everything's pretty much the same.
There's a statewide GIS committee that gets together and we will attend them.
Yes.
And so this group will be bringing it forward. The important part to remember is we share the same statewide data resources.
Right. I mean, keep in mind that data generated within a commission is not the same across commissions. And so any organizational system has to reflect that. And we cannot expect that if you try to implement one system and lock it down and say everybody will use this, you're going to have folks with stuff that simply does not fit, or you're going to have folks that have spaces with no data to put in it. And that gets very unwieldy very quickly. So we have to avoid that as much as possible.
Does the statewide grant system kind of dictate how you organize your material, or aren't they connected that much?
They're not connected that much. I mean, we can and do borrow from their organizational structure, if you will. I mean, that's how the data is filed. You know, and so sort of the topics, if you will. You know, we use the same general topics, but again, we have internal data that they don't deal with, or we have manipulations of data that they don't do, and so when we're getting, because we function at a different scale, our organization has to reflect that.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm trying to imagine how you provide a platform that's going to allow you to be ready for some other technology or data in the future. Is there sort of a straightforward way to plan for that, or you're just going to have to imagine how to be resilient?
The broader organization that Cynthia talked about is farther down the road. At the moment, we are focusing purely on the spatial data, and in that case, the organization of the spatial data is somewhat irrelevant because it's going to feed into another system however it is organized. And as I say, part of what we're trying to do is, as we learn through the organization process for the spatial data, we will leverage that knowledge to expand the organization to the rest of our information and use that to inform how we tackle upcoming technologies. That's the best answer I can give you right now.
I think it's pretty exciting.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm right now working very closely with the UNH Technology Transfer Center on their statewide asset data exchange system, SADS. Primarily on a project they're currently working on, which is pedestrian infrastructure, so sidewalks, crosswalks, curb ramps, and collecting basically condition and safety data for these assets on a regional level, which, like the culvert data which we collected in the past, will be transferred to them to put on basically a statewide map that will be available to organizations, municipalities to use as they see fit in terms of budgeting, project planning, setting priorities. And the last time I spoke in front of this committee, I was working on their data collection guide, which is basically what will be the summary of the program, the attributes that will be used, basically a guide for interns to know what they're looking at when they go out to the field. At this point in time, I kind of did the review of that and the current attributes, and we are in basically field testing mode. They have created the feature layer for the GIS program, so I will be going out in the field and testing these, seeing how they work in the field, if what's on paper, what looks good on paper actually looks good when you're standing there looking at the sidewalks and crosswalks, and if anything's missing. And another aspect of that is I am updating the protocol for our region, basically safety in the field, before I can actually go out in the field and test these on the roadways. And the next phase of this project will of course be project planning. What type of information will we send our interns out to the field with? What kind of maps will we have? I mean, sidewalks are a little bit more complicated than culverts, where you kind of find a road and a stream intersection, find them. We kind of have to come up with a plan on what sidewalks we'll be looking at, how we'll send people out in the field, how we'll orient them. I mean, you can't really send an intern out in the field and say, you've got Rochester, check out every sidewalk they have. So that'll be the next step, working with them, and then hopefully in the future, looking at this with the Technology Transfer Center and the DOT in terms of ways that we can make this data most usable, how municipalities would most like it seen, if they'd like potentially a scoring system for these as opposed to just the raw data that we'll be collecting.
So I'd just like to add on to that. This week when we had our meeting with the MPOs, and Rebecca here was
Transport New Hampshire.
Transport New Hampshire told us that you may have tried or seen the walkability score that you can do for your community or neighborhood. And she informed us that that had been purchased by Redford, which is a real estate company, had been bought. And so I had just heard the week before that realtors were noticing that they were using the walkability scores, and the higher the score, it was adding value of 1,000 to 1,500 based on the points and the value of the property. So this walkability score has been acquired by this national real estate company. And so this information about the condition of the sidewalks and walkability is very important in marketing and real estate. So we're really encouraged to be working on this and having value for our communities and for businesses.
The one that Trulia, I think it is, uses doesn't necessarily take into account the condition of the walkability routes. It's just how far things are away from the point that you're looking at. So.
And one of the factors that New Hampshire DOT has to take into account is the ADA requirements. So what are the curbs like and the ramps and the process for getting across the street?
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
Okay, so we're working on picking up the Mill Scenic Byway project again. It was recently designated as a New Hampshire Scenic and Cultural Byway in, I believe, May of this year. So there's been a corridor management plan. It's not totally put together. It's been started by Kyle Pimentel. He kind of worked on this project, and he was putting the corridor management plan together, but then he realized he needed to work on getting it designated first, because then you can work on the corridor management plan after that. So we did that. We got it designated. And so the Mill Scenic Byway, are you guys, how familiar are you with it? So it's going to run through Rollinsford, Durham, Nodbury, and Newmarket. Dover decided to opt out being a part of the Scenic Byway, even though it will run through it.
Can you repeat the towns again for me? Rollinsford,
Durham, Nodbury, and Newmarket.
And that's Route 108, actually.
And
right?
4. Yep. And then down through the downtown, the cutoff at the Grange building on Route 4, and it goes into the bridge. It stops at the bridge across South Berwick in the downtown.
So you can opt out of that. I didn't know.
Well, they opted not to join.
Right.
And so we're putting together we're just starting to put it together a committee that will be appointed. So for each town, we'll have a couple people or one person appointed to be part of the committee to work on the corridor management plan, which is just like an advisory committee, just making sure that the corridor is protected, making sure there's no crazy advertisements, there's certain rules about that. So we're putting letters out to people who have been interested or have participated in the past or may be interested. So that's the next step, is getting the committees together.
So the management plan then is something that each community would have to adopt, and then when they have a project in the planning board, it becomes part of what they review?
Oh, no, it's just at the committee level. Yeah,
It's just at the
It
committee
doesn't
level.
need to be adopted. You know, you're
Yeah, it's not a
working.
regulatory thing, it's just, it's basically can be used to promote local businesses and historic properties and recreational resources. Planning board has no involvement. That's been the concern, that's why some towns were suspicious, but it's.
Yeah, there's no regulation.
There's no regulation, said it 100 times, it doesn't seem to get through, so.
So the corridor management plan is just, it's a quarter-mile, it's the standard practice for doing any corridor study. We go out at a minimum of a quarter mile on each side of the road and collect information that might have value for a committee that's looking at marketing and promoting their community via the scenic byway.
I guess what confused me was the reference to advertising and signage, because that's a control that local communities have.
We do an inventory of the signage along the road.
Okay.
That's it.
All right.
Not advertising signage.
Well, we're all sensitive to those issues.
Right. The stop signs, the yield signs, the bike,
Okay.
those kind of signs.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone
Thank
else
you.
have any other project updates they'd like to talk about? Thank you. Now we're at other business. Does anyone have anything they'd like to talk about?
Well, I will just add one thing that Rochester's working on. Is that the time for this?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have really anything on our public works projects to update everyone on, but I know one of the things that I had been talking to public service about was electric vehicle charging stations and incorporating those into some of our public parking lots as we go forward. We did find, we didn't have any success with public service, but we did find a private company in New Hampshire that is working with the city of Rochester on potentially a station at the City Hall near the Opera House, and also with some of our private shopping center owners to put electric vehicle charging stations there. So that's just kind of I guess it's transportation related.
It is.
Is that do you know if it's a level 1, 2, or 3 charger?
It will handle every type of vehicle except for Tesla, and there is a modifier that you can buy that will allow Tesla vehicles to be charged there too. So I don't know how that relates to your question, but I'm sure somehow it does.
Could you share that? Because I was just at the AMPO, the Association of NPO conference, and automated vehicles and electric charging stations were a very big topic at the conference this year. And the levels, I'm not sure most people understand how the levels.
Our department's working on a statewide plan for electrification. Level 2, we're doing an infrastructure plan right now. Level 1 is basically your household circuit. You plug it into a wall socket. Level 2 is similar. It's essentially the same as a dryer circuit. It's 208 volts. Level 1 takes 8 to 10 hours to charge a vehicle. Level 2 takes, I think, 4 to 6 hours. Level 3 is called a DC fast charger. This is a very high voltage. It's like 480 volts. It's a very special connector. It's got all sorts of safeguards to charge a vehicle. It charges a vehicle in about, believe it or not, 15 minutes to a half hour.
And they told us it would take about 45 minutes on an average vehicle. So.
It could be level 2.
Yeah, I don't know. But definitely not even 2 hours, because we were talking about putting them in places where we have a limited 2-hour parking, which is already there. So
Level 2s run about $300 to $2,000. Level 3s are like $10,000 to $15,000. So
probably level 2, I would guess.
Got to think of the case, but that's perfect for parking garage where people can let their car sit for a few hours.
Yeah.
The Hooksett rest station is putting in a level 3 charger. And the idea being that someone with that vehicle can stop in and frequent the liquor store 20 minutes. And,
we hope so, right?
Safely drive away.
Well, yeah. Public
charge
Service provided grants and free stations to UNH, Hooksett. I think they did 5 of them across the state. This one is actually, the company that has this business model, actually, it will produce revenue once the infrastructure is paid for through the revenue of the machine. So it's actually, you swipe a card and you can charge a vehicle. So we'll see how much revenue it produces. We'll try it out and see what happens. But it sounds like a good idea to at least demonstrate the technology close to City Hall.
There are about 40 charging stations in New Hampshire, believe it or not.
There are, and I'm sure it will gain in popularity. The commercials have been, not quite as many as the election commercials, but they've been increasing in number. So
it's a good trend.
We'll see how it goes. But I just wanted to let people know we're trying it out at the municipal level, so we'll let you know how that goes.
And could you talk about the Spalding Turnpike group?
Oh, absolutely. The Economic Development Commission of Rochester has been, for a few months now, inviting the other economic development groups from the entire Route 16 Spalding Turnpike area to get together to talk about the economic impacts, the positive ones from the existing the current improvements to the turnpike, but also the potential negative future ones if the highway is not maintained to the level it needs to be, and if we go another 25 years without any substantial investment in the Spalding Turnpike. And currently, really the improved part of the road ends in Rochester, and the entire northern part of the route is, there's really very little plans to make any future changes to that route, which connects Lakewood and Misaki and the Conway area and the North Country through Route 16 into the seacoast. And when we looked at the entire corridor, and not only a lot of the economic impacts are not only businesses getting materials in and products out. We have a lot of commuting in the Route 16 corridor, and there's also a potential for a lot more tourist traffic to utilize that route the way that when 93 made the Ski 93 corridor in the northern part really made a huge difference in tourism. So currently, if tourists want to go to Conway, they're going to come to Rochester. Getting to Rochester will be a piece of cake, and then they start the crawl north past that. So we've been talking to all the communities about getting together to advocate for an update of the Spalding Turnpike Plan, which is about 20 to 25 years old at this time. Most of those improvements have finally been made, mostly in the last 5 years, and then in the next few years they'll be finishing. But when you look at the future 10-year plan, there's really nothing else there. And we really can't afford to sit around and hope somebody will say, hey, we should do something. We really have to speak up and advocate for ourselves to make sure that that plan, that the original plan is looked at for, did we accomplish all of the tasks? Is it having the effect we desired? And then what are we going to do in the future, particularly about some of those northern reaches? And of course, there's the exit 10 question as to, is that needed? Is it economically feasible? Is there an alternate route that makes sense now that some of those other parcels have been developed in the meantime? Certainly the businesses in the 108 corridor in Rochester, Somersworth, and Dover still would very much like to see that happen, as it will take significant pressure off exit 9 and exit 12 and give them a more direct route, which again leads to more economic opportunity for the businesses to grow and expand. And so we've had 2 meetings now. We do plan at the next Economic Development Commission in Rochester to invite Bill Cass from the NHDOT, who's the project manager, to talk about this year's proposed budget with some transitions at DOT. We want to make sure the coalition is supporting the strategic planning effort, particularly as it relates to this whole corridor area. The big challenge, though, is it covers multiple executive council districts, multiple senator districts, multiple MPOs, multiple everything. And there's really the entire plan covers so many bases. When we talked about it the other night, we were trying to list how many different folks this project would touch, and it's quite a few. But I think most of us there certainly agree with that we need a better plan, because we can't go out and advocate for things like Exit 10 without understanding the overall impact of the corridor. And in January, we hope that Strafford Regional Planning will be hosting something with our legislative bodies as they take office in January to explain the history of the corridor and why we would like them to fund the study of the area. Again, not jumping right into projects, but really just looking, before we spend money on projects, let's look at our plan, update it, and make some wise decisions. And the other MPOs that are affected are on board. They just were not able to attend the meeting. Cynthia's keeping them informed and aware, and I expect our January meeting will be well attended with a lot of the stakeholders. But we run into timing and weather issues. So I don't know. Is that good enough?
Yeah. Does anybody else have any other business?
I just would like to note, related to that there was a terrible tragedy last night in Rochester on Route 6, on the Spalding Turnpike, with a bicyclist that was crossing the Spalding Turnpike on a bicycle and was killed, unfortunately. And I know there's been some issues about lighting and other aspects that you've been bringing up, and so I will make sure that your concerns, the city's concerns about the lighting at those exits 14 and 15, I think it was.
Yes.
Specifically, it was in that area, and just to have them take a look at that when they're examining this accident.
Yeah, when, for some reason, I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but I think I was told that the standards by the state for lighting in the area of intersections had been changed and withdrawn, so no longer would they light as much area in the area of the interchanges. Because we found, as they were redoing the exits in Rochester, the lighting afterwards was not as robust as it was beforehand. So we actually ended up with less lighting on a changed road, which got people very confused, and we had a lot of people complaining to the city about it. We voiced our concerns to DOT when we were told that the standards, the requirements had changed, and that they would not be lighting the intersections. And I noted myself driving around, especially this time of year, it's very dark. It's starting at 3:30, and it's hard to see other, certainly somebody riding a bicycle on the turnpike.
Is that loud?
I don't think it's allowed. It doesn't mean people won't try things like that, and I mean, it's a terrible tragedy that it happened.
But I understand, he was crossing, he got nailed in the passing lane. He wasn't just riding up and down the side of it.
I have no idea.
7 o'clock at night.
But it's...
But I passed through there at 6:30, and it was raining, it was dark, there are a lot of northbound vehicles. It's very challenging driving.
It is, and again, with people getting on and off the exits at night, we have an industrial park at exit 14, we have a shopping district, a big shopping district at exit 15, and that's where we have very little lighting. So it's noticeably darker than it used to be.
So I'll make sure that gets passed on.
Thank you. All right, so that brings us to citizens forum. It doesn't appear there's anyone here from the public. So So that will take us right to adjournment, so I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
You got it.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, thank you for attending today's meeting and for putting up with me for your fill-in chair. Thank you. It was fun.